everyone, I'm Dead Knight, and this is In It to Win It. We are in the first season of Fractured in Alterac Valley, which was just released a couple of days ago, and I'm here to talk to you about what Legend looks like in this set for Standard. So I was able to hit Legend in just a couple of days, a really quick amount of playtime with Libram Paladin. So before we get started, just a reminder, please like, comment, and subscribe on these videos. You'll see what I end up hitting Legend and WoW with this season, and we'll talk about a couple other prominent and fun decks to play and break down some of the decks you've been seeing in the meta so far. But Libram Paladin, this deck has been around for a very long time. The Librams came out in Ashes of Outland, the first set of this most recent 2-year rotation that we're in. So most players are very familiar with Librams. The core concept is there are 2 key minions that are going to reduce the cost of Librams. Those are Aldor Attendant, and that's the 1-drop, a 1/3, and then you have an Aldor Truthseeker, which is a 4/6 for 5 taunt. These are great stats for their mana cost, and reducing the Librams eventually makes your primary buff card, Libram of Wisdom, free, which gives your minions 1/1. Normally it costs 2 mana. Now it's going to cost 0 mana. So every time you play a minion, you can put a Libram on it. When you attack and your minion dies, Libram comes back, you put it down again. And the top end Libram is great. It is Libram of Hope for 9 mana. It's going to give you an 8/8 taunt with Divine Shield and heal a character for 8. This is going to get greatly reduced down to 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 as you play these reduction cards, and you get just tons of value out of this. That package has been around for a while. It's got a few extra bonus cards along the way. Most importantly, Lady Liadrin, which every buff you've played on a friendly character, you get to come back to your hand on a battle cry. So if you've played a whole bunch of Librams of Wisdom, you get a whole handful of buffs. You can really kill somebody quickly with that. Or you have an extra handful of 8/8 taunts that you're gaining you life. So the sustain on this is huge. Gives you a lot of value in the end game, a lot of really strong board presence in the early game, and no bigger board presence early game than what we're seeing right now. This deck is just a monster in the early game. It's arguably an aggro deck instead of a mid-range value deck like it was before, and the consistency at which it takes control of the board early game is really phenomenal, and it's shining in this meta. So how's it doing that? Well, we went over the Libram package already, which is great on turn 1 and 2. We also have the new Paladin staple, Knight of Anointment, in here, drawing holy spells for and putting a 1/1 for 1 on the board. Obviously, since Librams are holy spells, you get to tutor for your Librams, and you are getting that Libram of Wisdom out right away is really helpful. Not only that, you still have Hand of Adol, which is really strong in early board control, and you have Noble Mount. Noble Mount is a breakthrough card from United in Stormwind. For 2 mana, gives a minion +1/+1 and Divine Shield, and then Death Rattles to create a 1/1 Divine Shield. So early game trading with other decks that are playing for tempo, this is the king. Not only are you going to put this on a minion, kill your opponent's minion and keep your guy on the board, but when they do finally remove it, you still have a 1/1 with Divine Shield on the board. So when you have these Librams coming in and out of the game, not to mention the other buffs you have, the ability to stick to the board here is unrivaled. No deck can stick to the board like this. Not even these crazy Druid decks that are putting tons of minions out. Nothing can stick to the board like this. It's really hard to clear the board from Paladin. And with the buffs coming on, that means that your opponent is taking tons of damage all the time. And because you have so many early game buffs, so I just named 3 different 2-drops, all of which can be tutored for, that you can draw right away. The consistency of this deck is great. You have another card that's going to be drawing you buffs, and that is Stonehearth Vindicator. The stat line in this kind of sucks as a 3/1, but for 3 mana, it's going to draw you a spell that costs 3 or less, all of which are the only ones in your deck are the ones I just named that buff your minions, and if you play them this turn, they are free. So if you have anything on the board and then you play this guy, you get to buff that thing on the board and use that buff right away. It's absolutely huge. Even though the stat line is pretty weak, getting that, drawing a card and playing that card right away, buffing your minions, taking that tempo. Some of these games just go out of control really fast at the beginning of the game. And most importantly, for the card that really enables this, I have to say, is the full-on MVP of Fracture and Alterac Valley right now, which is Irondeep Trogg. This unassuming 1/2 for 1 is the scourge of the meta right now. It is absolutely wrecking any deck that is trying to play early game spells. Lots of spell heavy decks like Warlock and Mage just have no answer. Not to mention that it punishes your opponent for going second by having a coin. What this guy does is just has that 1/2 for 1. It copies itself whenever your opponent plays a spell. Since you follow this up with a total of 6 cards in your deck that you can play on the next turn that buff your Irondeep Trogg, including Libram, which I'll get to in a second, there's no way for your opponent to easily remove this thing because it keeps getting buffed. So normally a Touch of the Anathema just pops this guy right out, but you put a Noble Mount on him, now it has Divine Shield. Warlock just cannot get rid of this guy. So you can see yourself, if you're on the coin, turn 2, play the Trogg, coin, and Noble Mount, and a lot of times you'll just see Warlocks concede. There's nothing they can do about this card. As far as the Libram goes, if they copy this thing with a Libram on it, now you get 2 Librams going back to your hand. And the amount of value you're going to get as that game progresses with get that extra Libram, buffing your minions for free, getting them back with Lady Liadrin, the amount of extra damage that comes through is terrifying. So Irondeep Trogg is going to steal some early games against decks that are spell heavy. It gives you 3 different minions that are 1-drops. It gives you 3 different buffs that are 2-drops. So your early game consistency is really smooth. And since the deck already has established years-long value in mid-range and late game, you're pretty much equipped to win at all phases with this deck. So what are the new cards doing for us? I said that the best card in this set for Paladin is Saidan the Scarlet. The potential is definitely there. Right now, we're running this. So far for me, I haven't played that many games because my Legend run was so quick, but it's a nice to have. It's not, I don't want to say it's 100% necessary. If you start to get to these late games where you're using your hero power a lot, which I'll get to in a second, you can really get some extra value over this guy. Obviously, he's huge with buffs. He has rush. He's great, but he's not absolutely critical. The cards I just mentioned before are absolutely critical. This guy is definitely good, but not absolutely critical. Still, I think he's still maybe worth what I called him the best card in the set, because games where he comes down, he's a huge monster. So, but he's not absolutely essential. What has turned out to be absolutely essential is Lightforged Cariel. The new hero has drastically changed the way that you build this deck, because there's another Libram that we even managed to cut from this deck, which is Libram of Justice. It's a 5 mana spell. It gives you a 1/4 Light's Justice weapon and sets the health of all enemies to 1. So this was the top defensive card in this deck for, I guess, 16 months, 20 months. Lightforged Cariel has rendered this card meaningless. The worst thing that could happen is that if you've already played Lightforged Cariel and then you need to play Libram of Justice to control the board, you're obviously not going to kill your immovable object to do it. So you just cut it completely. So your defense is Lightforged Cariel. This hero is going to equip you a 2/5 weapon that never loses durability and cuts the damage you take in half. So again, we're talking about value, crazy value. You don't have to spend any extra resources to get this value. You're just bashing people with the immovable object over and over again, getting your 2 free damage a turn, sniping off minions, and then vastly increases your survivability. Top that off with getting up to 4 Librams of Hope to restore your life, and it's extremely difficult to take you down at the end of the game. A lot of times you'll see fast decks like Hunter try to rush you down, and you can stabilize with Lightforged Cariel, not only for the craziness of a movable object, but also because it deals 2 damage to all enemies when it comes in. So clears the board and gives you that 5 extra armor and the damage reduction and the bashing weapon. Just crazy. Oh wait, but there's more, because the hero power then sets you right into the end game, for 2 mana, giving your minion a random minion in your hand +4/+4. The minions that you're running, a lot of them are having Divine Shield, a lot of them are having Rush or both, so you're finding that that +4/+4 for a minion in your hand is paying off major dividends. So that's the core package of new cards. Then we also have some of your oldies but goldies for Libram Paladin, Devout Pupil. With that early game buff package that we're running, you often get a Divine Pupil really quickly or for free later in the game as a 4/5 Divine Shield. So that's a major board swing for you. Cariel Roame, just the natural hero, the natural character from Forge and the Barrens, has always been great in Libram. 4/3 for 4 Divine Shield. When it attacks, reduces the cost of holy spells in your hand by 1. This is going to reduce your Librams, of course, your hands of Aldor, and that's pretty much it. But that's what's really important. So getting those Librams starting off 1 turn earlier is just sometimes devastating for your opponent. Finally, there's a couple other important rush minions. Varian Rin from the last set is turning out to be the absolute capstone here. It's going to draw you 3 cards almost all the time because you have a bunch of minions that have Taunt, Rush, and Divine Shield. And you're going to have at least a 7/7 for 8 Taunt, Rush, Divine Shield. And then you get to usually play at least 1 free Libram on it. And just when opponents think that they're finally clawing back, they manage to survive your onslaught in the early game with the Trogs and all the buffs. Now this guy comes, refills your entire hand, and then just clobbers people, destroys their best minion, and sticks to the board with huge stats. This guy is just, it's too good to be true. The fact that 1 card can do all this is kind of surprising. It's a neutral, so anyone could run it, but Libram really makes the most of it by having those free buffs to throw on top of it and a nice steady diet of Divine Shield minions for it to draw. Final card I'm going to name here is another oldie, which is Blademaster Samuro. Been around since Forged in the Barrens, so we've been dealing with this guy for several months now. This is pretty much your only card that you have to beat decks that somehow manage to get the board from your early game, especially Mirror Match or Druid, other decks like that are really going to try to bum rush you at the beginning of the game. Blademaster Samuro is your guy. You want a mulligan for this in the Mirror Match and against Druid and other decks that you think are going to be trying to fight for that early board, because if you ever lose the board, Pirate Warrior also obviously, this is going to be the only thing that's going to give you that board back, with the possible exception of Lord Barov. Lord Barov is not as good in this deck because you don't have any AoE to speak of except for Lightforged Cariel, but it's still good because you usually have a couple minions on the board, so you can usually pop off a big minion with this. Blademaster Samuro is really, though, your only way to deal with a wide board. Combined with Librams and Hand of Aldor, it's usually going to get the job done and clear your opponent's board. Oftentimes that's the game when Blademaster Samuro comes down against a fast deck. So love this deck. It has all the tools to win. It's viable in every single phase of the game. There's room for a slot or two to tech in a Rustrot Viper, which I did in this list. Rustrot Viper is essential in the meta right now. 1, for the Mirror Match. It's the only way to get rid of the immovable object. 2, you have Owl Warlock, which we'll talk about in a later video probably. This destroys the Warlock's Ruined Mithril Rods. That's a major setback. Warlock just cannot recover if they waste their turn 4 playing a weapon that gets destroyed right away. Also, Pirate Warrior is always going to have at least 1 weapon. Demon Hunter is going to have weapons. Rogue is going to have weapons. So Rustrot Viper is just a quality card and the only tech choice I made here. But you have some room for other tech options you like. For me, this is the one. But overall, this package is just really neat. It's really consistent and it's dominant right now. There's a pretty uncontested run to Legend for me, and the deck is not hard to make because there's not too many new cards. Pretty much your only must-use new card is Lightforged Cariel. So I think that I highly recommend this deck. Easy to make. You're probably familiar with the mechanics already, so go ahead and give it a try. Let me know if it works out for you as well as it did for me. Leave some respectful comments below and tell me what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tune in next time.